Hello and welcome to this video for pre-calculus. This is the lesson 85 advanced trigonometric equations solution, how to do the advanced trigonometric equations. So lesson 85 advanced trig equations. Okay, so when doing these problems, there are 4 or 5 essential steps you need to follow. So first is to use the trig identities. Then step number 2 is convert to quadratic. Step 3 would be solving the quadratic. Step 4 is converting back to trig. And step 5 would be solving for theta. So the problem we're trying to solve is 3 tan squared theta is equal to 7 secant theta minus 5. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is use the trigonometric identities. So we have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. You divide this by cosine squared theta, and you got tangent squared theta plus 1 equals secant squared theta. So now you need to solve for tan squared theta because that's what you're going to plug in into this equation right here so that you can convert it to a quadratic equation. So tangent squared theta is equal to secant squared theta minus 1 because you -1, -1, essentially that. So this is the equation you're going to use for tangent squared theta. I'll just highlight this over here. So now you plug secant squared theta minus 1 into tangent squared theta. So you got 3 secant squared theta minus 1 is equal to 7 secant theta minus 5. And now you just expand this. So you got 3 secant squared theta minus 3 equals 7 secant theta minus 5. And then you make it a quadratic by like bringing everything to the other side. So you got 3 secant squared theta minus 7 secant theta is equal to plus 2 is equal to 0 because this minus 5 gets plus 5 and that's plus 2. So now that you have it like this, let's just erase this top part right here so we can create some space. So we have changed that initial equation to this, and now we are done with step 1, and now step 2 is converting it to quadratic. So you just replace secant theta with x. So you got 3x squared minus 7x plus 2 equals 0. And from here on, it's just a quadratic. So we're done converting it to a quadratic. Therefore, another two ways or three, the multiple ways you can solve this. One is using the quadratic formula, which I don't prefer. So I like to factor it out by splitting the middle term. And that would give you 3x squared minus 6x minus x plus 2 equals 0. So you take out the 3x by grouping it. So you got x minus 6. No, that's not 6. You got x minus 2. And then you factor out the -1, you got x minus 2 equals to 0. So now you have 3x minus 1 multiplied by x minus 2 equals to 0. So x is either equal to 1 over 3 or x equals to 2. Now let's just get rid of this part because we don't need that anymore. Oops. I can just delete that, and let me just rewrite this up here. X equals 1 over 3 or x equals 2. Okay, and so we're done solving the quadratic. So step 3 is done. And now we need to convert this back to the trig equation. So since secant theta is equal to x, secant theta is equal to 1 over 3 or secant theta equals to 2. And since secant theta equals to 1 over cosine theta equals to 1 over secant theta. So now we can substitute the secant for 1 over cosine, essentially. So you got cosine theta is equal to 3 or cosine theta equals to 1/2. And now once you see this, you know that it cannot be true because cosine exists only from 0 to 1 because you have 1/2, you have root 3 over 2, but you never have a cosine value which is greater than 1. So this does not work. So let's just cancel that out with a big fat X. This is not a possible solution. I'll actually just cancel it out so you can see that. And I'll just get rid of this part right here. Okay, so now we have cosine theta equals to 1/2. And from this point, you know that, so to solve for theta, wait, let's just mark this down, right? And now to solve for theta, theta is just equal to the cosine inverse of 1/2, or if you want to represent it, arc cosine, I think, of 1/2. And let's get rid of this part up here. So now, let's move this up here. And now you have theta is equal to cosine inverse of 1/2, which if you know your unit circle, you will know is 60 degrees. Or if you like radians, it is pi over 3. And let's confirm with Siri. What's cosine 60?
I found this on the web.
Cosine 60 degrees.
The answer is 1/2.
And that is how you solve advanced trigonometric equations. And one last thing before you go.